Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, From 3 Hours to 10 Minutes, Koch's Autonomous Invoice Reconciliation. We're excited you could join us. My name is Megan Billingsley, and I'll be moderating today's event. Today, we are going to deep dive into how Koch Ag and Energy Solutions has worked with Semaphore AI to transform one of its most manual and time-consuming financial processes into nearly touchless automation. Before we get started, let's go through some quick tips to make sure your webinar experience is the best it can be. At the bottom of your screen are resizable and movable application widgets. Feel free to move them around to make the most of your desktop space. The slides will advance automatically during the presentation. If you need to enlarge them, simply click the Enlarge Slides button in the top right corner of the presentation window. If you need technical assistance, click the Help widget in the bottom left corner at any time. As the presentation gets underway, you may submit questions using the Q&A widget. We will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation, but if a more informative answer is needed, or if we run out of time before we answer your question, we will follow up via email. After today's presentation, you'll receive a link with on-demand access to the webinar so you can watch it again at any time, as well as share the content with colleagues. We are thrilled to be joined by our speakers, Brett Woodorf, Finance Director, North America Gas, Koch Energy Services; Martin Miller, Director of Data Science and Analytics, Koch Ag and Energy Solutions; James Bearden, Forward Deployed Engineer, Semaphore AI; and Ram Venkatesh, CTO and co-founder, Semaphore AI. To kick off, I'd like to ask each of our speakers to provide a quick introduction of themselves and their work. So, Brett, would you like to start us off?
Sure thing, thanks. Brett Woodorf, Finance Director for our North America Gas business here at Koch Ag and Energy Solutions. I've been with this business for about the last 5 to 6 years, but I've been around the Koch halls for the better part of 20 years. All kind of grown up through finance or finance/tech related type roles.
Excellent, thank you. And Martin?
Yeah, Martin Miller, part of the IT organization, but lead our data science and analytics capability that support both our commercial trading as well as our operation and financial needs when it comes to data.
Fantastic. James?
Hey everyone, James Bearden. I'm a forward deployed engineer with Semaphore AI, and what that means is I get to partner with our closest customers like Martin and Brett here, and actually be boots on the ground to work with them both on-site and virtually to help them build AI agents and walk them through how the Semaphore platform works. So excited to tell you about this agent here today.
Excellent. And last but not least, Ram.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Ram Venkatesh. I'm one of the co-founders here and the CTO at Semaphore AI. I just want to first off thank Brett and Martin for the amazing partnership we've had over the journey. They've been one of our first design partners, been working with you for more than a year with our agents in production for some time now. So we're really excited that you could make the time to join us today and looking forward to hearing the story.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be with us today. So with that then, let's get right to it. To kick us off, I'd love to hear about what invoice reconciliation was like for Koch Ag and Energy Solutions prior to undergoing this transformation. Brett, what was the previous state of invoice reconciliation and what were the challenges?
Yeah, so with a lot of reconciliation processes, it's very manual. And just kind of dive a little bit into our business to give you a little bit of the breadth of the manual nature that we deal with. Our business deals with about 400 to 500 different unique suppliers and customers every single month for moving natural gas around the U.S. And when we come together every month to settle on those invoices, we're settling with at least as many invoices with those counterparties, and that's 400 to 500 counterparties, both buys and sells across 90 different pipelines that we're active on in North America. So some of those can be 1 to 2 page invoices. Some of those can be 40 to 50 page invoices that span, the breadth of the business that we do with counterparties across the U.S. So they can get pretty lengthy, they can get pretty detailed, and that can be a very, very manual process to reconcile when you're settling with counterparties on that every single month. As you expect, ticking and tying those is effectively what our process was before. It's trying to digitize or at least get the information out of the invoice into a usable format. And that was manual before. That was looking at the invoice, that was probably processing and looking at some type of OCR to help us out, but that we found, doesn't work in all cases. So the process before was highly manual, was putting text into Excel and then effectively just ticking and tying.
Yeah, it's a lot of manual work in that before state. Martin, over to you. How did Koch Ag and Energy Solutions learn about and connect with Semaphore AI?
Yeah, so it was like Ron mentioned, it's been the last couple of years. So about 2023, I think, is when we probably made the initial connection. And that connection was through Koch Disruptive Technologies, who's the venture and growth equity arm here within Koch. And so they're always out in front looking for transformative and new technologies to bring within Koch through what we call the Koch Lab. And so that's where we made the connection with Ron, James, and the Semaphore team. I kind of joke, it's almost like the GPT 3.5 timeframe. I'm kind of like dating years on when GPT models were released, but that's kind of when we made the connection with the team. And we were looking for a partner to really help us think about enterprise application and usage of generative AI. And KDT is on that forefront looking for partners within the industry that understand how to scale and how to solve problems at an enterprise level. And so it was that connection through KDT that we were able to identify a partner like Semaphore.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We know Semaphore AI's invoice reconciliation agents were key to that transformation. James, how do these invoice reconciliation agents work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to walk you guys through every step of the journey together. But I think if I kind of summarize it down, ultimately, what we want to do is teach our agent how to perform the work that the analysts on Brett's team are doing today. And from a Semaphore perspective, there's really three core capabilities in the platform that we really focus on in every use case, but in particular in this use case. And those are what we call the Semaphore runbook, our document intelligence layer, and our semantic layer. A little bit about how those work. Our runbook is, think of that as an English description of the process and the work that's done today. And so what we're trying to capture there is all the things that analysts are doing today. That's both things that we can clearly document about where we get the data from, how we interpret that data, and then what we do with it to perform a reconciliation. But also more of the tribal knowledge that analysts just intuitively know from doing this work day in and day out. That's really what we ground the agent and how to autonomously perform the steps required to complete each one of these reconciliations, and how to manage also the one-off exceptions as well. Next is the document intelligence layer. And this was the trickiest part that we loved working with Brett and Martin to help refine and make better during our journey. Documents are a really tough problem to solve. And so what we partnered together is to build a document intelligence solution that learns as it goes to be able to extract all the information we need to complete each reconciliation from each one of our invoices. As Brett was alluding to earlier, these are not your simple invoices that are 1 or 2 pages. These are 20, 30, 50, in some cases 80 or more than 100-page invoices, and they come in a variety of flavors. So our document intelligence solution will learn about these invoices as they come in and perform a series of extraction capabilities and then validations to make sure that we extracted the data correctly and can proceed with accuracy as we get into the recon steps. And then finally is our semantic layer. Our semantic layer is how we interpret all of the data that an agent's going to work with. And so we point this agent at all the data sources from documents as well as the structured data. In this case, we were comparing with their internal finance data. And we built a semantic layer that allows that agent to be able to take an English question or a step in a runbook, for example, and derive a deterministic query to allow us to go retrieve an answer to that question, perform a deterministic reconciliation for each one of the line items in these invoices. And we compile all that down into a very repeatable process that the agent will execute each time.
Excellent. Thank you. Ram, any thoughts on what James just walked us through?
No, I think that was a really good description of the overall process. Now, Martin and Brett's challenge to us was threefold. One was, how do you make sure that the business analyst is confident and in control? Like, they have to, specify how the document needs to be processed. It should not be something that requires translation from IT. The second was, how do you build trust in the process so that as they see it, they can say, okay, now I can rely on the information that's being extracted and tied off in the various systems. And then the third piece was we want to see this working not just for like a small subset of the invoices, but at scale. So as you add new folks into the system, new counterparties, new invoice formats, can the system correct and improve itself in a way that the toil that they have to do does not increase with time? So that's what our platform and approach that James outlined with this natural language runbook is geared to do, is to deliver on those three objectives.
Excellent. Thank you. And then, yes, just talking about that runbook, James, could you share more about that and how that aspect of your AI works?
Yeah, absolutely. So for everyone here, if you haven't heard of Semaphore, the runbook is really at the core of all of our agents. And that's really how we ground the agent in defining the work that it needs to complete and doing that in a repeatable way. And so really what we want to accomplish in the runbook is not only give the agent the steps, but also really allow it to take on the persona of the analyst that's completing the work. So in the runbook, we have a few key sections that are going to be critical to making sure we get high repeatability across every transaction. So just a couple of examples. Typically in a Semaphore runbook, we'll have what we call an objective that really allows that agent to understand the role it's taking on. So in this case, a natural gas invoice analyst and what that means to Koch Industries. Next, we'll have some context. That's just awareness around the different data sources this agent has to work with. Think of all of your different company lingos and acronyms that the agent needs to be aware of as it's going back and forth with the human if needed, as well as the core steps. That's really going to be what's most critical here. Explaining in the runbook what are the key steps that agent needs to complete from beginning to end so they complete the full process autonomously. And then towards the end, we'll also have things like guardrails. What are things you should always do? What are things you should never do? If you run into an error, how do you handle exceptions? This is what's really going to make this agent flexible to be able to automate things that we've struggled with in the past for things like RPA solutions.
Excellent. Thank you. Ram, anything you'd add about the runbook there?
Yeah, I think so. In our sort of approach of understand the work, do the work, show the work, that's kind of how we want the agent to operate. So the runbook represents the understanding. And if you don't understand the work, the chances of the rest of that are pretty small, right? So I think that this is like the distilled understanding of the work that then lets the agent reason and do the work. So typically what we've noticed in our deployments is 90% of what people change over time with the agent happens to be the runbook. So it's this constant ability to tinker with and slowly, continuously improve the work. That's what's been missing with all sorts of financial automation in the past. And I think agentic automation enables people to do this incremental improvement over time. So the runbook is the cornerstone of it. And we see this in how business users interact with that runbook over time.
Great. Thank you so much. Martin, from your perspective, how has having this runbook or anything else that James and Ram just described, how has that impacted you?
Yeah, I'd say from an enterprise perspective, as we think about people, process, technology, data, and having AI throughout that, the runbook is guiding the AI within the business process, providing the documentation and the clarity and the trust for how the AI is going to interpret, like Brett was describing, the reconciliation process. So we found that to be kind of a cornerstone for our ability to take AI and put it into very complex processes, whether it be a reconciliation, whether it be a front office process or something that we're applying even in the operations and the reliability state. So definitely giving us capability to scale. Ram hit on the scale a little bit, and we'll talk more about that. But the runbook has been that cornerstone to take AI and thread it through that people, process, technology, and data that we need.
So it sounds like a lot of value to you there then. Brett, coming over to you, how have agents transformed invoice reconciliation at Koch Ag and Energy Solutions? What is the current state like, and what has been the business impact?
Yeah, so I think you heard James talk a little bit about it there. And really, it's been a core two functions. The document intelligence was a massive aspect of our use case that we used with this, and it's being able to not, individually code an OCR tool to go read these invoices, but have something that's smart enough that can actually ingest an invoice and know what to go do with it based on what we've already told it. So that was a huge piece, is just digitizing PDFs and using their document intelligence. And the other part of it is actually having a runbook that can go perform the work of the knowledge worker, that can now take that digitized version, go retrieve data from our system and our data lake, and be able to bring those together and help start to perform the reconciliation for us. And the first iterations of our agent was just bringing stuff together and bringing data together and digitizing it. But then now it's maturing that and actually having it perform some of the reconciliation and be able to point us to the differences, to where we're not having someone doing that manual nature of the ticking and tying like I talked about before, and finding those needle in a haystack for where the variances exist. So I'd say, right now, current state, it's automated those very two manual aspects of our process, as well as now that becomes our first stop. So when we receive an invoice, we're sending it straight to our agent first to let it do the parsing, let it do the data pulls, let it do the comparisons, and bring all that together into one spot for us, as well as pointing us to the variances to say, look here, it looks like this is where you need to look for your variance. So that's been, very, very impactful to our teams, and really that impact has been twofold. We've been able to, one, use a team that we can now be scalable with the business. And now, one increment of business growth doesn't equal one increment of growth on our team. And so now we can do processes, we can do more with less. So we've been able to scale with the business, as well as get our analysts into performing, more fulfilling work. Instead of performing reconciliations, now we're seeing our analysts partner closer with our business, partner closer with our traders and our marketers, and being able to help them understand, what information do you guys need about how we're settling with counterparties and just our business activity that we're doing with counterparties, to help them help our customers more and help us grow.
Excellent. Thank you. Martin, anything that you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think Brett hit on a lot of great things there. What I would say is echo is, we believe AI is the future within our business. And so how we apply it throughout the different transaction life cycles, or how we apply it to help our customers capture more value, like Brett's speaking into, what I'd say, a model we've been leveraging here within our CFO org is that we don't believe AI will take your job, but we believe people that know how to use and leverage AI within their role will take your job. And so we're all about empowering and finding that scale and that capability to give our business teams the tools that they need to be effective to leverage emerging technologies like AI through Semaphore. And so we look at that as a differentiator within the organization and within the teams to create even more value leveraging AI.
Brett, any final thoughts before we move on from this discussion?
I'd say, the real value is not, hey, I've automated this process and now it takes a fraction of time to do what I'm going to do. But now we're able to go leverage those people into actually partnering with the business and doing more value add work, which is, 10 times more fulfilling for an analyst to do than performing reconciliations.
Absolutely. I think that that's an important point to make. So I do want to ask about some additional workflows outside of invoice reconciliation that are delivering impact as well. And one of those is work order creation. So James, coming to you here, how are agents powering workflows around work order creation?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been another fantastic use case we've partnered with Marg's team, as well as many individuals who are representing the business on the operations side. And I think just a quick high-level summary here, there's a lot of work that happens today to be able to capture an observation in their plants and facilities and be able to send that all the way downstream to create a work order to address the issue. So in this example, an issue could be anything from a valve is broken, our pressure gauge needs to be fixed, there's something that needs to be addressed in the plant. And today, the plant operators will report that on their mobile devices. And then there's a lot of back and forth with an individual that we can refer to as the gatekeeper. And they have to collect a lot of information with that individual on that's filing a service request to get that item addressed. And there's a lot of back and forth to make sure we understand what facility we're operating in, where in the plant this piece of equipment is located, and how to gather all the right details to understand the issue. And then ultimately downstream create a work order to address that issue. And so The people that are doing this work today are, very high value resources that have high tenure at these plants and locations, and their time could be spent, as Brett was saying, much better to be able to help with general strategy and analytics around the plant. And so what we've done is built an agent that helps interact with the plant operators to be able to collect these details and then do all the hard thinking and lookups behind the scenes to understand where in the plant this individual is, and actually creating that service request, and then ultimately automatically creating the work order downstream and ensuring we don't have duplicate records and things like that today. So what that's done is freed up a lot of these gatekeepers' time to be able to go focus on higher value work. But Martin, anything you'd like to add there?
No, I think that, James, I think you nailed it there. I think that speaks to the scale of Semaphore. And I know we're talking about a back office reconciliation process, but we've been able to apply that technology like James describing to our manufacturing and our plant reliability processes and all of our fertilizer production assets, even on the commercial trading side. So really taking that manual mundane where we have very important information that we need to capture, but we're very human dependent on getting that information, like James was describing, a service request or a work order out in the field. That's really kind of your first entry point to understand, do I have a risk within my plant? Do I have something potentially broken? And we're very human dependent on that. And so Semaphore and applying AI to that to get better work order information. If you think of a work order all the way to paying a vendor and counterparty to do work on your assets, you want to understand the cost, you want to understand the risk, you want to understand the visibility within that. And so we've been able to apply AI, Semaphore, to that problem and really improve the quality of our work orders. Just kind of, back at napkin math, we've identified about 20% of the service requests. We process roughly 8,000 service requests on an annual basis. There's about $6,000 worth of opportunity cost to get a work order from origination all the way through work execution within the plants. And so getting better quality information and putting AI within that process has been a game changer for us, and we're continuing to scale that out. So.
And Martin, what about plant status intelligence? How are agents powering workflows around that?
Yeah, so another great call, another great opportunity. There's a lot of communication, a lot of chatter, trying to understand what's causing reliability impacts within our facilities and our site. And so one of the business teams had an idea of, hey, can we put AI on all that communication? Can we help distill down what's driving reliability issues if we have outages, if we have emerging risk? And so with Semaphore, using our data that we have within the cloud, we were able to bring all that information together, take emails, take chats, take a lot of different communication channels, and really tell the story of what's happening within our plants from a reliability perspective, ultimately tying that into a lot of our enterprise data. And so as you kind of do the look backs and try to understand and tell the story of our performance, we've been able to take Semaphore and put it on top of that data to really drive a lot of good conversations of what are our reliability strategies, what are the bets that we're making, and are we achieving those bets? And AI is helping us really tell that story more succinctly and understand where we have risk from a reliability perspective.
And Martin, can you speak to how agents are powering workflows around operational reliability?
Yeah, so another great opportunity here. So we have a capability called our monitoring and diagnostics team. They monitor roughly 25,000 machine learning models. And so think of those models as kind of your check engine light on your vehicle where it tells you your tire pressure is low. They have first principle machine learning models that are monitoring for deviations within pressure, temperature, vibration of our critical assets. And so, as you can imagine, it takes a lot of manpower, really smart engineers to understand what's driving alerts when they do occur. And so we've been able to work with Semaphore and work with our process engineers to build a diagnostic capability that when those alerts come in, instead of a human in the middle first screening and trying to get the right context and the right information about that alert, we've built an AI agent that actually screens those thousands of alerts when they come through to really help get to the core of here's where you should start first investigating the problem. And so, these analysts are processing 100 alerts plus a day, trying to figure out false positives to true alerts that are worth their time to go diagnose further. So another great example where, we're looking at value capture on opportunity cost, efficiency, getting better information to our counterparties, all the way down to the production and reliability of our critical assets, and using Semaphore and AI to achieve that.
Excellent. Thank you. Ram, any thoughts on what Martin has just shared?
Well, firstly, it's just humbling to hear the breadth of use cases that you've been able to deploy with the platform. For us, this validates like a keystone thing was we start in the office of the CFO with finance because the ROI is clear, solutions got to work. Let's prove one use case that we can do that really well. But then you can see with AI, it's sort of the imagination of the customer to deploy additional use cases that's only constrained by what's relevant to your business. So instead of thinking of this as you're not buying an agent for invoice recon, you're really having the capability to apply AI where it matters to you, right? And so that flexibility, just like the runbook gives you the flexibility to improve your work, this is another sign of flexibility to go after adjacent work that also has to be done with the same three things. It's complex work, there's fuzzy math and matching involved, it's got to be done consistently and reliably. If you can do that, then we can achieve all of these sorts of outcomes. So this is a really nice validation of our sort of how to land and expand from an ROI standpoint. And to hear that play out in the real life, I think that's humbling.
Got it. Thank you. When it comes to working with all of these agents, why is having a low-code, natural language-driven solution so important? James, I'd love to get your perspective here first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at Semaphore, we're highly passionate about enabling a non-technical business user or the analysts that own the work today and have a really great idea that they want to build an agent for, to be able to define and build that agent on their own. And so, the primary place that we define that agent is through the runbook. And so what we're really striving for is to be able to enable an analyst, because we believe they know the work that they want to automate the best. And so if we can enable an analyst to define their work through a Semaphore runbook and bring them the platform capabilities to help build an agent that accomplishes that work both accurately, quickly, and reliably, then that's going to lead to a flywheel that allows the business to be able to expand their army of AI agents very quickly without having to funnel everything through IT to build as well. So we believe that's the fastest way to be able to really get value out of AI very quickly.
And Brett, I'm curious what your perspective is on this too.
Yeah, I mean, from the business user side, what I'd highlight is just with the natural language runbook, our teams have the ability to kind of write, run, maintain, but really own those solutions and their processes. And while we appreciate the strong partnerships we have with Martin and his team, we don't have to have an IT partner to go do some of those things. So it's empowered our business users to go write and build things themselves, and something that doesn't have to be in an IT stack to go get worked on. What I'd also say is just their ability to kind of transcribe their own processes and put that into a runbook and be something that they can go deploy and use on their processes immediately.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you. I do see a lot of great questions coming in from our audience, and we'll be getting to those shortly. But before we switch gears, I have a couple more questions for our panel. One in particular is for Brett and Martin. Having built out all of these agentic use cases, what would you say your most important learnings have been? Martin, we'll have you start.
Yeah, I would say business context, the business leading the way in terms of understanding where AI can create that value and that ROI. So whether you're in finance, whether you're in accounting, treasury, credit risk, operations, and engineering, it was the business that was leading the charge on thinking through where do we go apply AI? How do we go create a runbook around our work order and our gatekeeper capture process like James referred to? So if you're thinking about it from a pure IT perspective, you're likely going to be destroying value. You're going to be slowing down progress and transformation within your business. And so really from our lens, we look at it as we need a technology and platform that allows our business to go capture their knowledge and put AI within that. And so that's where I'd say leading with the business taking charge and driving those outcomes, IT being there along the way to co-develop with them through that process has been really critical to us, key to us.
And Brett, what would you add?
I would say some of the key learnings on the team here is just opening our eyes to the to what's possible with AI, and it's causing us to think differently about our roles, think differently about how we go about solving solutions. And as Martin said it earlier, it's not about, replacing people or eliminating jobs. It's about how can I go do something different, more value add with the time that I'm spending in the business, right? So it's evolving our thinking. It's evolving how do we solve processes, and it's really just changing the way we think about our roles and how we operate.
Excellent. Thank you so much. In terms of what sets Semaphore AI apart, Ram, what would you say differentiates Semaphore AI from competing solutions, and why should companies choose to partner with you?
Yeah, I think it's the focus on the business user more than anything else. So everything we do is centered around making sure that we can enable the business user to be successful at getting to an outcome. This is kind of what they do in their job, and now they need agents who can help them on that same journey. I think there's lots of different ways to build agents, and they're all appropriate in different contexts. But for these kinds of complex processes in particular, empowering the business user fundamentally, I think that's one of the key areas of focus for us. Secondly, in a lot of what was described today, you got to look at data that comes from various different places. You got to look at systems that more than one system to get your job done. So this ability to not just connect to things, but again, understand them. Like this is when I use SAP versus this is when I'm going to look at this Excel spreadsheet, which has the model that I'm going to use for this particular calculation, right? So I think that ability to understand all kinds of data, all shapes of data, all colors of data, being able to contextually relate that to your work, I think that's really important. But the thing that we actually do best in class is do the work accurately. Because if you don't do that, especially in finance, if you tell somebody that I can do your work mostly right, that's just not valuable, right? So being able to say, it's okay to do X% of the work, but with 100% accuracy every time. This is how the work was done. This is where you can actually go see the output. Because you spend so much time proving that the numbers are right. This is part of the day in, day out of all of these processes that Brett and Martin are talking about, is accuracy. And so I think that's kind of where we tie things off. And this is the focus for us has been, how do you empower the business user to look at all the data they want to and do the work accurately? That's how we think about applying AI to these kinds of problems.
Well said. Thank you. Brett, Martin, anything to add regarding your experience working with Semaphore AI as a partner?
I can't speak more highly of James and team and the partnership that we've had. I mean, really, both technically and, one being able to help kind of build a solution for us, but also I think the biggest, most lasting impact is getting us to think differently about our jobs. Like I mentioned, and I can just reiterate it, it's not approaching the problem how we've approached it before, but has really helped us see things through a different lens and given us kind of the art of what's possible. That's really been cool to see all the light bulbs kind of go off on the team, right now of, oh, if it's possible to do this, then maybe I can add this, or maybe I can apply it over here to this other thing that I'm doing that's relatively similar. From a finance perspective, there's a lot of things that we deal with that are kind of reconciliation based. So there's a lot of other, multiples that we can get out of this agent and things like that. But it's also thinking bigger about AI and how it can be used in real world use cases. It's not just a better search, or it's not just something that can help me manage my calendar. It's something that could actually go do work for me. And I think that's something that, Sema and not only the capabilities of the team, but the capabilities of the platform has really opened our eyes to.
Got it. Martin, you get the last word.
Yeah, no, I'll echo a lot of what Ram said. As we look at a technology partner, we expect reliability, we expect availability. We're thinking through scale, both on the problems that we're trying to solve. And so making sure that you have a partner that is vision aligned to what you're trying to achieve, but also will challenge you and is staying up to date or keeping pace with this changing market that is AI. And so we've seen every bit of that from Ron, James, and the Semaphore team, really challenging us on even our paradigms and our mental models for how do we take AI and apply it to our enterprise. And so for us, I think that's what we value is a company that can come in and solve the really tough problems, but they can help you scale that and apply it throughout your business, whether it be back office operations, trading. So that's what we've really look for, and we've been able to really partner with the team here on the call to achieve that.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for a great discussion. In the time that we have left, I would love to take some questions from our audience. Just a reminder to our viewers, you can submit those using the Q&A widget on your screen. And to our panel, please just jump in as you'd like. Our first question here says, what are the characteristics of a good first back office use case, and what qualities lend themselves towards agentic solutions?
I may jump in here on that one. What we've seen in our back office has really been things that are very logic based. So, if you could think of processes that are controls oriented or audit oriented or reconciliation oriented, a lot of that stuff has logical steps to it that can be performed. And a lot of those things are things you can bake into a run book. So that's not to say that you can't do more complex things, but those are the things that we've seen the best success with out the gate, and really the things that start to see the light bulbs come on in everyone's minds on, how can that be applied to more complex use cases. But it's really the stuff that's very logical.
Excellent. Thank you. Our next question here says, are the AI agents integrated into the ERP system?
Yeah, so from a technology perspective, and this is probably more from a case architecture for how we're moving data from our ERP, our ETRM, our CRM. The agents work within the cloud, and so we're eventing all of our transactional data from our ERP to the cloud within AWS, having the agents integrate and reason over that data within the cloud. So we have an event-driven architecture, and so then as the agents do their work, do the reconciliation, provide the context back to Brett and his team, then they're able to approve that work to then integrate back into the ERP. So they're not working directly within, but they are 100% integrated back into our event-driven architecture to move that data into our ERP.
Fantastic. Next question. How long did it take to build the agent, and is it cost effective to consider for an emerging mid-market company?
Yeah, I would say I would say, James, go ahead, fire away, James. I think you probably, we could all speak to kind of the timeline and all these different use cases, but James, I don't know if you want to take the first one.
Yeah, absolutely. So team, as you heard at the beginning, Brett and Martin and team were one of our first design partners back in as Martin, you were saying, when we had the early stage LLMs. And so we were doing a lot of evolving the platform, and it probably took us a couple of months to get there, and we built this in phases, and this was as our platform was evolving. I think one of the great things we've gotten out of this partnership with Brett and with Martin is the ability to very quickly evolve our platform. And I think Martin, Brett, please feel free to comment here, but I think what we're seeing is now that the platform has evolved and our ways of working have evolved and LLMs have come such a long way, we're seeing the ability to be able to build agents now in a matter of days, and in some cases be able to get to a production state in a matter of weeks, as opposed to a matter of months or longer, like we saw in the past. So
I was gonna say months to weeks, and I think what you're speaking into, James, is both the flywheel happening on good problem identification for AI usage, but then that underlying technology and that architecture to accelerate that flywheel. I'd say the question was, is it an advantage, or should a smaller company be thinking of applying or looking for AI? I would say you're going to be at a competitive disadvantage if you're not actively looking or trying to identify ways to leverage AI. And so we look at that as a competitive advantage, both from solving real business problems, but also building knowledge and capability within our teams to leverage AI.
Great. Thank you so much. Next question asks, how are you rewarding business users who are creative and willing to engage in developing these new mechanisms for getting work done?
I mean, there's a lot of different ways, right? I mean, you can, obviously reward folks through better and more challenging work, through different opportunities. what I've seen is people really light up when they're able to go solve a problem and they're able to go jump in and solve the next problem, as well as help the teams around them be more successful. So, there's obviously ways to do that through, through monetary means or through non-monetary means, but a lot of it's just opportunity. And I think we've seen a lot of people lean in towards those opportunities to go solve the next problem.
Yeah, I'd echo what Brett said. We at Koch look for people that are contribution motivated, that want to create an impact and want to create value and solve a problem. But then we also want to ensure that we empower them with the tools, the technology, that's top tier, tip of the spear, right, to be able to go achieve those outcomes. So I think those both go hand in hand in terms of how we're both motivating the employee, but also finding technology to meet kind of those really highly contribution motivated individuals to do exactly what Brett just described.
Yep, well said, Martin.
Excellent. Next question. What is your advice or best practices for taking agentic solutions from experimentation to production? And are there any pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah, we have a lot of battle scars maybe to share on that. Problems not to go after, or things not to go tackle. But I think having a business customer that understands what AI can achieve for them, like Brett right here, that really is leaning in as a leader to say, hey, our capability is going to leverage AI to go transform our flow of work. So I think that's ingredient number one, is having the business bought into applying it. But then I think also, kind of like Brett alluded to, of finding the right scope or the breadth of a problem. So not jumping in with the end-to-end perfect solution, but thinking of it from like a crawl, walk, run mentality, and how to apply and leverage AI. Brett, I don't know if you would echo, or James, Ram, if you guys would echo anything for how you guys have seen enterprises really identify good use cases, or how they've maybe attacked them to achieve success.
I think you're right. We've discovered a bunch of things to do and a bunch of patterns to be careful of. I feel like you hit on the first one, which is the person who knows the work really well, like we call the process architect. I think the role of that person in this process cannot be overstated, right? It's just working with that sort of clarity of what the outcomes are and how you have to, what good looks like for that job. It feels like that's been super helpful. And I think, to tie off another point that Brett mentioned, there's an assumption that AI is somehow going to be like black box magic. You're going to give it a problem and it's just going to spit out a solution for you. Or it's just going to say, I read it all, I did it, trust me. That I don't think works. I think that procedural logic work. I mean, I think it's not work if it's not like repeatable and done to a spec. So if the person who knows the work can say, here is the spec for doing the work, I think that agents can take that and derive autonomy from it and say, now that I know how to do the work, if you ask me how to reconcile this invoice, I'm going to do it to your spec. So it seems like understanding that that's part of the process. Like somehow the actual core steps have to be transparently expressed to the AI, and it must demonstrate that it is following that when it does the work back. It feels like these are sort of two key characteristics where we've seen like successful use cases. And of course, the third part is, if it's really valuable to the business, then I think everybody kind of pays attention and say, yeah, we're going to go do this. So I think the way you went about, I think, picking that first use case where you gave us a really technical challenge, you said, show me you can read the invoices, and then we'll talk about how we're going to process them. And then, going through and actually doing the work, and it was a high impact, high value use case. So it feels like there's a lot of good lessons there about how to go about identifying work that matters, the person who can do it, and then how you can do the work.
Yeah, and maybe one thing I'd add on there too is, the agent that we have deployed right now doing this work looks nothing like, or looks very different than the agent we very first deployed on this. And so going from experimentation into production is, don't be scared to go put it into production and then go iterate from there. I think we saw, we get a big chunk of volume by putting something in production, and then we realize what we want to go change and tweak about it. And so we go make some changes and we go redeploy, and we make some changes and we redeploy. And what we found is, as you get better at, either the prompting or the writing of the run book, getting better at telling the AI what those instructions are for your process, the better output that you get. And so you don't realize that until you go in and use it and leverage it. And then, every time you go run it, you have 2 or 3 thoughts of how that can work better.
That is such a wonderful point, Brett. I feel like people ask me this a bunch about like, what's the difference between a program and an agent? I feel it's like what you just described right there. Their programs are like stone tablets, right? You can have them and they never change. Whereas I think people are so creative and they improve constantly. And if you can have that same sort of flexibility in improving the agent continuously in production, I think that the outcomes can get substantially better.
Really great points. I think we've got time to take one more question, and this is for the Koch team, so I'll end here. How receptive were your team members to adopting the AI, and how steep was the learning curve for them?
I'd say directly on our team, like you said, we started this journey with Sema quite some time ago. So what I'd say is very early. It took a little bit longer, and just people weren't quite ready or weren't quite understanding the capabilities of AI. And as the LLMs have gotten better, as they've gotten more comfortable with things, you've just seen it explode. So whereas maybe initially was a little bit of hesitancy or a little bit of confusion, very quickly became, I can see the power and the art of what's possible, and now I know how to go leverage this for the next thing. So we've seen that evolve over time, and I'd say it's just getting quicker and quicker and quicker.
Fantastic.
I'll just echo that what Brett shared from just even the IT team, even the IT not understanding, well, how is the business going to truly adopt AI? And so I think it's like Brett just described, giving them the capability to learn and iterate has been really where we've seen the adoption and the growth. So.
Love that. Thank you so much for sharing. That is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank our speakers, Brett, Martin, James, and Ram, for a great discussion today. We appreciate you sharing your insights and expertise with us. And of course, I'd like to thank our audience for joining us today. Today's webinar will be available on demand, and you'll soon receive an email with a link so you can rewatch or share with your colleagues. We hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.
Thank you.